Hello everyone, Ivan Zosimov here. This is another Notes from Underground video. I feel a little bit bad because this is my sixth video on this channel since I've started. Three of my videos are, sort of pre-planned, pre-written, more polished, and by more polished I mean, glorified PowerPoint presentation. More polished videos that are pre-written and exploring deeper issues. And this is my third video that's just a kind of extemporaneous, off-the-cuff video on something new that I saw I think a couple days ago or yesterday in this case, and me just commenting on it. And I feel bad because you know these are so easy to make, these types of videos, but on the other hand, I mean, I think it does. I guess it can come off as lazy. I know not many people watch my videos yet, but I want to build up my channel, and I want to give off the impression that I'm putting work into it and I'm not just making a bunch of cheap kind of clickbaity videos. But I don't know, things happen and I want to comment on them, and it's just especially for this, it's not worth making a big video for this. I have some ideas for more polished videos floating around in my head. One of them is on cultural Marxism. I know that's been done to death on both sides, but I do have something that's a little bit, I think, takes a little bit of a different angle on it. And my second one, I'm thinking about talking about Jonah Goldberg's book, Suicide of the West. I talked about in my last video that I read the book and I liked it, but now I have some real issues with it. I still, overall, I think it's a fine book, but I do have some issues with it, particularly Jonah Goldberg's reading of history. And I want to kind of take that to explore narratives in history and how we as human beings create narratives in history. We create kind of these grand political narratives of how history has unfolded, and I really like exploring that, different views of people's views of the big picture in history and how that works, and seeing what that reflects about their politics. I think you can tell a lot about someone's politics and political worldview based on how they view history. And I want to start exploring that with Jonah Goldberg's book, because I think that'll be fun. So anyway, about this issue that I want to talk about. So Turning Point USA, most of you will know, is a sort of conservative youth movement organized by a gentleman named Charlie Kirk, a few years older than me. It's a conservative youth movement. They're mostly on college campuses, although I think they're a little bit in high school too. And they kind of represent a pushback to the sort of leftist monopoly on college campuses, kind of a typical sort of Reaganite conservative organization, so that the emphasis is mostly on free market economics. The emphasis is mostly on limited government. I'm not a huge fan of Charlie Kirk, not necessarily because of his more libertarian attitudes, but just because, I don't know, he doesn't seem, I don't want to come off as mean, but like he doesn't seem, the most sort of intellectually sophisticated, and a lot of his stuff just kind of comes down to, it just feels like whatever Trump supports, he supports, and then just kind of retroactively finds a justification for supporting it, which is actually what I'm going to talk about now. So there was an incident. They had a talk yesterday called Culture War. And so it was Charlie Kirk and a contributor to Turning Point USA named Rob Smith, who is a black and gay conservative who's also an Iraqi war vet. And so, they were talking about pushing back against the sort of left-wing, this kind of left-wing juggernaut that just seems to be kind of winning in the culture war. And there were a couple people who asked questions that garnered some controversy. One of them, I'll just kind of throw out right away. One of them talked about preserving white values, and Charlie Kirk basically shut that individual down, which, honestly, good for Charlie Kirk. I agree with him on this point. There's really nothing to comment there. The second one I do want to comment about, seemed like he was Catholic because he was asking the question holding rosary beads. And he goes up, and I guess I saw Turning Point USA's clip of this, so I don't know how it's edited, but it looks like he's asking specifically Charlie Kirk this question. He's asking, how does anal sex help win the culture war? And it was kind of a snide remark against Charlie Kirk's acceptance of an openly gay man on his platform. And Charlie Kirk again basically shot this guy down by deferring to Rob Smith. So Rob Smith answered the question and basically said, like, well, it's America, people can do what they want, blah 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 blah. Gay people can contribute to this country. So in another Turning Point USA contributor named Benny Johnson called this person the new Westboro Baptist Kids. Called him homophobic and blah blah blah. Okay, so I have some thoughts on this. Firstly, I don't, I think it's pretty obvious the way this guy asked the question, how does anal sex help win the culture war? I mean, it's just it was so, I think, abrasive the way he asked it. I don't think it was a good way to ask it. It just came off as really snide and really rude, and I don't think he helped himself by asking it that way. I think some people in this kind of YouTube community are going to disagree with me here, but I do think it matters how you present an argument. I don't think it's caving into, David Frenchism to say that, like, you have to try to be reasonable when you put forth an argument. It just seemed belligerent for the sake of being belligerent. I don't care for how the argument was presented. That being said, I think this guy, there is a legitimate point to what this guy was raising that I want to get into, which is, should the Republican Party, more generally, should the conservative movement in general, just concede now that we're okay with accepting, homosexual behavior as normal? So what do I mean by this? I do not mean that, we should reintroduce sodomy laws, right? I don't mean that we should go around shutting down gay bars in the country. That's not what I'm saying. But it just seems like, as far as promoting traditional marriage as public policy, either in local government or federal government, well, we're just done with that. It's done. It's finished. The question is, should we do that? And maybe, we can, let's just, for the sake of argument, let's treat this as an open question. The reason why is because, there's an issue with the conservative movement, and it's been an issue, I think, for decades now, where conservatives seem to make decisions based off of convenience or based off of certain maybe prudential strategic reasons, and then sort of retroactively justify them philosophically. Okay, so what do I mean by this? So, for example, the fusionist philosophy in conservatism, the marriage between traditional social conservatism in the social and cultural sphere and marry it to a very robust political liberalism, classical Lockean liberalism in the political sphere, as far as economics are concerned, as far as dealing with social issues are concerned. The marriage of those two philosophies that, was really big under people like Ronald Reagan, that is championed today by conservatives like David French, like Jonah Goldberg, like Ben Shapiro. That starts out as kind of a marriage of convenience. That was not a sort of whole cloth articulated philosophy. That Marxism was articulated by Karl Marx as a actual philosophy by which you view and govern the world. Classical liberalism, right, was an actual philosophy that was articulated and was supposed to be a way in which you view and govern the world. Fusionist conservatism was kind of just a marriage of convenience by people like Bill Buckley in the 50s, because, the big threat is communism and, progressive leftism. And, who's opposed to that? Traditional social conservatives and libertarians and sort of classical liberals who don't like the way communism, uses big government to clamp down on individual liberties. And so even though these people would have a lot of disagreements with each other, Bill Buckley said, well, enemy of my enemy is my friend, and we have some similarities in how we both despise communism. You know, is there a way we can sort of fuse these two together, you know, just for the sake of defeating communism? And so, you know, that's essentially what he did. And, you know, conservatism in America has been like this ever since, until up till very recently, where you have this split between more traditionalist conservatives like Patrick Deneen, Sohrab Ahmari, and more either pure libertarians or, you know, fusionists like Goldberg or David French. So again, that was a marriage of convenience, but over time, people started to treat it as if this is a sort of philosophical position, you know, that just kind of makes perfect sense, and, you know, was just kind of there from the beginning. I mean, Jonah Goldberg does this in his book Suicide of the West. Shapiro does this. He probably does this in his book that I haven't read. What is it? Oh no, I'm blanking on the name of his book. The Right Side of History. That's right. You know, a lot of and you know, French does this, where, you know, they sort of act like the, you know, mixing classical liberalism and Burkean social conservatism. Oh, it's just completely natural. You know, I think on one hand, I think you can make a reasonable case for it, but I do think they downplay the fact that this was originally a marriage of convenience. This was not, you know, a philosopher sitting somewhere and examining society and examining philosophy and coming up with this. This was simply Bill Buckley throwing together these coalitions of people to help him fight against progressive leftism and communism. So I think similarly, I'm seeing a lot of this now with gay marriage, where so conservatives lost the gay marriage debate. In the culture, it's becoming very, very culturally unanimous that homosexuality is normal, that gay marriage is fine. I would venture to guess by 2030, people who are against traditional marriage will probably be treated the same as someone saying they're against interracial marriage, or someone who, you know, is an out-and-out racist today in society. I think people who believe homosexuality to be immoral by the end of next decade will pretty much be treated the same way. And conservatives have basically, I mean, it started a little bit before Obergefell, but I think it picked up immediately after, have sort of retreated to this kind of libertarian position of, well, it doesn't really matter what people do. It doesn't really matter, whatever. If you want to be gay, that's fine. Just don't go after us. You know, don't go after religious institutions. Which may be strategically fine. You know, maybe that's the most realistic thing you can do in this culture, you know, but are we just done fighting for traditional marriage? And are we going to pretend as if, oh, this is what the conservative movement always thought? Because it wasn't. I mean, Defense of Marriage Act was a thing. It was very popular among Democrats as well as Republicans. You know, under George W. Bush, I mean, Republicans were pro-defending traditional marriage. It wasn't until very recently that you had a very libertarian aspect of get the government out of marriage altogether. And honestly, I think this is kind of a concession. Conservatives knew that they were losing the culture war on this issue, so let's just become libertarian on this. That way we won't get punished too hard. Which, again, strategically may be smart, but again, on a more philosophical level, why are we reverting to this now? That, you know, we just don't care. You know, is there anything about the traditional moral order that is worth defending? Or are we just going to become purely libertarian on this? You know, maybe I don't have a lot of a point to this video here, but I just think it's something worth thinking about, that conservatives are quickly becoming more libertarian on social issues. To me, it doesn't seem like any sort of principled stance. It doesn't seem like, yes, you have, you know, full-on libertarians who've always been full-on libertarians, and you can look back and they've always, you know, believed these things about gay marriage and stuff, but I think you have a ton of conservatives who are becoming more libertarian on these issues, and it seems to me more like a kind of retreat. It seems to me like well, we've just lost here, so let's just push for getting the government out of these issues. That way, we won't get hurt too bad. I mean, is that good? This goes back to debates about things like Drag Queen Story Hour. Like, again, not national laws, not sodomy laws, nothing radical like that. But on a local level, can you, shut down? Can people shut down Drag Queen Story Hour if, you're in a majority Christian or Catholic town and, people don't want public institutions displaying this stuff for children? They don't want their tax money going to it. We're hearing now that some states are starting to portray the LGBT rights movement as in the same light we would the civil rights movement. Can there be no pushback on that? Are we going to be just kind of libertarian and saying whatever? Like if states want to do that, they can. I mean, again, in places in the South, for instance, where or even again to local towns, if you have large pockets of conservative religious citizens who don't want their children learning about this stuff, can there be any way that they can push back, or do we all just have to be? Is this just the new party line now? We just got to be libertarian on this issue. The new issue is it's perfectly okay to promote gay marriage, but but just give us this little corner somewhere for us to practice our own beliefs. I mean, it seems a lot like a concession to me, and it seems a lot like a sort of retroactive way of dealing with the fact that we lost the issue. And the reason why I worry about this is the left's going to pick up on this. The left, they're not stupid. They're going to pick up on the fact that majority of us only became libertarian on this issue 5 seconds ago. And they're going to pick up on the fact, well, isn't this just a cover for the fact that you're homophobic? Isn't this just a cover for the fact that you're really against gay marriage? That you want to just be libertarian on the issue? I mean, after all, isn't that what the KKK used? They used states' rights to talk about, racial issues. Well, are you just using states' rights to cover, that this whole idea of like, oh, well, I'm libertarian on gay marriage, so, nothing, don't bother me. Like, I don't know if that's going to work, because I think the left, in some ways, legitimately, is going to go after it as, no, you're just covering for yourself. This isn't any sort of principled stance. So it just seems to me that there needs to be a better understanding on the difference between doing something because it's strategically what needs to be done now. I think you can make a case for we need to be libertarian on gay marriage now because just realistically this is the best we can do in this battle. Versus I'm going to take a philosophical position that the government should do nothing to promote traditional marriage. The government should do nothing to stop the spread of promoting homosexuality as normal behavior, if as a Christian I believe that it's not normal behavior, if I believe it's sinful behavior. Philosophically, I'm going to have the stance that the government can do nothing about it. I think conservatives need to do a better job of distinguishing between the two things. We may needed to have done it back in the 50s with fusionism. There may need to have been a better understanding of, okay, I'm going to side with liberals and libertarians against progressives and communists now because they're a shared opponent of ours, and this is the best way we can beat them in the political sphere, versus classical liberalism and traditional Christianity just go together perfectly. They perfectly complement each other on a philosophical level, and we need to promote this hyper classical liberal conception of American politics. This is conservatism now. I don't know if that's getting across, but that's what I'm trying to say here. I don't know if that's getting across, but I think that's an important thing to think about. We need to start thinking more about the difference between what you do strategically and philosophically what you think, because there is a difference. And I think for too often, conservatives are getting it backwards. They're doing things strategically and then later trying to justify it as a sort of philosophical truth. sort of political truth about the way politics works, the way political philosophy works. They're not keeping that division in mind, and I think that's going to cause problems in the long run.